Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BRASS 101, produced by the Bryce and Ronnie Avalanche Snow Safety Foundation. We appreciate all of you joining us tonight from around the country and around the world for this very important short presentation on avalanche safety. We have a great program for you here tonight with our instructor, Scott Schell. We're also going to have an opportunity to hear from one of the most amazing skiers in the big mountains, Marcus Caston, who's joining us from his home in Salt Lake City. Want to let you know that we will have a recording of tonight's presentation if you want to share it around, and that will be available on our BRASS social media channels as well as on brassavalanche.org, our website. Cindy Burlack is an amazing individual, and she and a number of others have really spearheaded BRASS over the last decade. It will be on January 5th, 10 years since the tragic avalanche accident that took the lives of Bryce Astle and Ronnie Burlack. This year, we look back and look at the education and advocacy that BRASS has provided, and you're a big part of that. If you want to support BRASS and what it stands for and what it's seeking to do in pushing education and advocating for safety, there's a QR code on the screen right now. You can just scan that and make a small donation, even if it's $10, $25, $100, whatever you can do to help BRASS. We provide these BRASS 101 educational sessions at no charge. To kick things off this evening, it's my pleasure to introduce someone who I've gotten to know very well over the years. All of us felt the pain when Cindy Burlack and her husband Steve and the Astle family lost their sons on January 5th, 2015. But they have taken the last 10 years to really put energy into ensuring that no one else would have to go through what they went through. And we appreciate all of you being here tonight. Without further ado, please welcome Cindy Burlack.
Hi, everybody. Merry Christmas. I just thought we'd put a little spin and seasonal spin on this introduction. I want to thank you so much for coming here and learning about avalanche danger. We want to thank our sponsors, World Cup Supply, Sync, Backcountry Access, and our many individual supporters. This week is 10 years since Steve and my son, Ronnie, foreran the Beaver Creek downhill. He was spectacular and in his element. A month later, he and his U.S. ski team teammate, Bryce Astle, were in heaven. That day, the program directors, the coaches, nor the athletes knew the dangers that lurked in that inviting, sparkling powder on the Austrian piste. The simple information you'll hear today could have saved them. We don't want others to be missing their loved ones. We at BRASS, the Bryce Ronnie Athlete Snow Safety, put on this program to save others and to save you. Our foundation has some great news that we have a partnership with Atle McGrath, the Norwegian World Cup star, and he is now wearing our BRASS logo on his race helmet in the World Cup races. He'll be racing here at Beaver Creek on Sunday in the Giant Slalom, and you can watch him with the BRASS logo on his helmet. We're very happy about that. And it's also opened up the opportunity to present BRASS in Norway and translate it to Norway and Norwegian and hopefully to other languages. We really believe in our condensed program, and we feel it fills a gap in avalanche education. We, BRASS, my family and the BRASS family would like to send a heartfelt wish to all of you for a happy and warm holiday season. Now I'd like to get on to introducing our wonderful presenter for tonight. We're very excited to welcome Scott Schell. He's coming to us from Snoqualmie, Washington. He served as the program director at Northwest Avalanche Center for over a decade, and now he is the executive director of their nonprofit arm. Over the past 26 years, Scott has been an instructor trainer for ARI a certified AMGA ski mountaineering guide. That's American Mountain Guides Association. Scott has guided around the world and has several first ascents in the Pacific Northwest. He's also the co-author of a single source how-to book called Backcountry Skiing: Skills for Ski Mountaineering. His favorite spare time endeavor is doing wilderness trips with his 8- and 6-year-old children to pass on his passion and knowledge. And Scott went the extra mile, literally, to accompany Steve and me to Washington, D.C. a few years ago to address a subcommittee in Congress about funding snow safety. He rocks in the avalanche world. And here's Scott.
Oh gosh, thanks, Cindy. And thanks, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to spread the word of avalanche awareness to y'all. And maybe we should just kind of jump right in because I think we have a little bit of a limited time here. So I'll see if I. Okay. Well, yes. So tonight, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is, what is an avalanche and why do they happen? I'd like to introduce avalanche problems. So avalanches come in all shapes and sizes. We refer to them as problems. Talk a little bit about red flags, which is kind of the observations that you all can make while you're outside. I want to talk a little bit about the basics of an avalanche forecast and how to read it. And then set you all up with some resources for your local avalanche center and international resources, and a few things to think about as you're out skiing around and riding around with your partners. And this is probably a good image just to look in on. You can see this is an avalanche incident. So this is a ski patrol search and rescue incident at a ski area in Europe. Where you can see all those people standing. That's the what we call the piste, and the area in the foreground is the off-piste. And in Europe, there's a little bit of a different take at ski areas. There's on-piste and off-piste, and off-piste is the backcountry, and on-piste is the front country. And this is a fatal avalanche accident here, so close to the ski areas. So avalanches are not just something that occurs to people way out in the deep backcountry or in areas in which they were, earning their turns or going uphill on their own. I mean, they can happen to those in ski areas and adjacent to ski areas. So it's always a good thing to know your surroundings. So, I mentioned in ski areas and outside of ski areas. Obviously, the vast majority of avalanches happen in the backcountry, in the true backcountry. There's a handful of avalanches that happen in side country, and we've started to see an increase in area avalanches in the past few years. So those are avalanches that are occurring within the area boundaries. A large portion of those are still occurring within the area boundaries in closed areas. But that's not to say that there aren't avalanches in opened areas. So on certain days, where there's larger instabilities out there, incorporating some of the tactics that we'll talk about at the end of the presentation for even, front country inbound skiing is a smart thing to be doing. So I think, before we can really talk about how to avoid avalanches, I think we need to kind of frame up what the heck an avalanche actually is. So here's a little short video of what an avalanche looks like. This happens to be a skier triggered avalanche. You can see this person skiing down, got pretty lucky. They were able to sense the snow was moving and catch their edges in the bed surface there and manage to not get caught and carried. But at a simple definition, an avalanche is really just a mass of moving snow heading downhill. So let's talk a little bit about what the ingredients are to make an avalanche. One of the things that I think about when I'm skiing, whether it be in the backcountry or in the front country, is do I have all of the ingredients or all of the ingredients present to produce an avalanche in the terrain that I'm currently at. So there's these three core ingredients to make an avalanche. First, you need unstable snow. I think that's what most people think about when they think about avalanches. It's like, oh, we got to have snow, and it needs to be unstable. It can't just be stable snow. I mean, it's not just snow, I should say. There's snow comes in different forms. The snowpack is produced by different, storms that occur throughout the winter, and different atmospheric conditions produce different layers within the snowpack. And it's kind of those layers within the snow that lead to unstable snow. Then we need avalanche terrain. We need some sort of a slope. If you don't have avalanche terrain, even if you have unstable snow, if you can imagine, really unstable snow out on a flat meadow, you don't really have any avalanche worries. So we need a slope, and we need a slope of an appropriate angle to produce an avalanche. Next, we need a trigger. We need something to disrupt that narrow balance of stability. And those triggers come in lots of different shapes. The trigger that you saw in the video just a second ago was clearly a skier. And the vast majority of avalanches that catch people, the people are the trigger. It's not these random other triggers that can be out there, such as weather or loud bangs and explosives and stuff like that. So I like to think of avalanche terrain as probably the biggest thing to really focus on. And terrain and your ability to move within different types of terrain, I think of that as kind of the throttle or the accelerator of risk to you in the backcountry. There's not a lot that you can do about unstable snow. You can't really choose whether or not the snow is stable or unstable. You don't get to make that choice. And to take it even one step further, you oftentimes don't get to know exactly how unstable that snow is. There's a lot of uncertainty around the layering within the snowpack and whether or not that snow is actually stable or unstable. And I think if if you were to talk to many people that have spent a lot of time in the mountains, we can get pretty good at understanding the snowpack. But at a certain point, there's still a fair amount of uncertainty. And I think many of us that have done it for years, and I'm sure Marcus could speak to this at the end of the presentation, you think and then you're caught off guard, and there's surprises that catch you. And so really the best way that I think about managing my own risk is focusing on the terrain and understanding if I'm in avalanche terrain or not. And adjusting the severity of that terrain through where I happen to choose to go. So there's a couple of things to look at in this slide here. So slope angle is probably the first thing that you want to think about regarding avalanches and avalanche terrain. You can see in that little protractor there that 30 to 45 degrees is where most avalanches occur. That's the vast majority of avalanches. It's not to say that you can't occasionally see avalanches occurring on slopes below 30 degrees. We see that in really unstable conditions. And it's not to say that you can't have avalanches in slopes above 45 degrees. It's just that they're less common. Slopes above 45 degrees, we tend to not see a lot of accumulation of snow. There's constant sloughing, so the slabs don't get really large. And then below 30 degrees, it's oftentimes not steep enough unless you have really, really unstable layers. So that's the first thing to look at. And I want to maybe just give one kind of pro tip for you guys to think about, is that angle, that 30 to 45 degrees, is what we call the start zone angle. So that's the amount of angle that is needed in order to get the snow to begin to move. That is not to say that that's the only place that you will encounter an avalanche. Avalanches can run very large and in high consequence, larger terrain, where you'll see an avalanche start on a steep slope and run out into the flats down into the valley. So you can be in 0-degree terrain and be caught in an avalanche if you have an overhead hazard that includes terrain in that 30 to 45 degree range. And there's a slide path that is connected to. And so that next photo to the right there that shows avalanche path, you can kind of get a sense of that. That's an avalanche path. If you're standing anywhere within that red area, you're in an avalanche path. You are subjected to risk of an avalanche given unstable snow and a trigger to get everything to move. And you can obviously see down in the foreground of the lower point in that picture, not all that terrain's 30 degrees, but there's definitely 30 degrees or steeper at the top part of that avalanche path. So that's what I'm talking about. So it's not just the steep terrain. It's that you can be in lower angle terrain and be in avalanche terrain if you've got an overhead hazard. So a couple other things just from an identification standpoint when you all are out there is obviously you know, whether or not there's trees present. You can see in that avalanche path picture there's really dense trees to each side or the flanks of that avalanche path. Clearly avalanches don't run there because the trees are just so dense. So those are kind of great indicators. Like, you know, if you're skiing along through some dense trees and you pop out and it's kind of an open path and you see some steep terrain above, that's a really good indicator. Like, oh, hey, we're in avalanche terrain here. And then, you know, there's other indicators like trees leaning downhill, branches missing, lots of small kind of the Christmas tree slope. Those are just kind of indicators that maybe you happen to be in avalanche terrain. So when you're out and about, it's really a good exercise to start to train your eyes to try to figure out, hey, how steep actually is this slope? Because once again, that slope angle and avalanche terrain is kind of your throttle to managing your own risk. And so getting really good at IDing like slope angle is quite helpful in understanding whether or not you're in avalanche terrain or not, or what severity of avalanche terrain you're in. I should also probably step back and say that like 30 to 45 degrees is kind of the sweet angle that most of us want to ride in. So unfortunately, like, you know, a 30-degree slope is kind of an intermediate blue slope at a ski area, you know, and kind of that 35 to 40 to some odd degrees is kind of a black diamond slope. And so it just so happens that like what we all want to ride, most of that is avalanche terrain. And here's just kind of a little exercise where, you know, you take a photo, and albeit it's a little bit challenging to really gather or garner slope angle from a picture looking at a slope, but there's just some kind of some numbers here that have been calculated based on this image of different angles, and more or less everything there to some degree, other than just kind of the ridge line, is avalanche terrain with a few flatter benches interspersed. So this is a little run that's in the Northwest at a rowdy little ski area called Alpental up at Snoqualmie Pass. Upper International it's called, and that's a pretty steep slope. It's in the low 40s to mid 40s, depending on exactly where you're measuring it. And so that's, you know, as mentioned, that's like it's a fun run. It's a black diamond. Many of us like to ski runs like that. That is clearly avalanche terrain. Another cool tool for you all, and you can use this actually at ski areas, terrain adjacent to ski areas, and it's really common use in backcountry tour planning is a lot of these super cool shading overlays that we can find in mapping applications such as CalTopo, Gaia, Onyx, and so forth. This is actually a couple of different runs at Alpental. There's the Edelweiss chairlift in the red line. And you can see slope shading. And it's a really cool way to kind of get a sense of like the tour that I want to go in, is there avalanche terrain? And there's a chart of what those colors mean. So let's talk a little bit about triggers. Triggers come in multiple forms. Obviously, there's explosives. That's how your ski patrol teams oftentimes manage the risk inside ski areas. They're using explosives, and they're using a few other techniques to to, get avalanches to frequent before the ski area patrons show up. There's natural releases. Those come in all forms. It can be sun, it can be a thermal shift, wind, rapid loading. There's lots of different natural triggers. And then there's kind of this remote trigger that we have at the bottom right. That's where there's some sort of a load applied. And then in some other area, it's actually releasing an avalanche. And then there's the human trigger, and that really should be the focus of you. I think regarding that avalanche triangle where we have unstable snow, terrain, and a trigger, you should assume you are always a trigger. That's how I think of it. I'm always a trigger as I move around in the mountains. And I just need to know, is there unstable snow? And how unstable is it? And am I in avalanche terrain, and what severity of avalanche terrain? So I'm kind of running that calculus as I move around and adjust. So unstable snow comes in lots of different forms. Within avalanche forecasting in North America, we tend to categorize the different types of unstable snow in these groups called avalanche problems. And we can group those avalanche problems in kind of 3 core groups. So hazards that come from new snow and wind. So we have wind slab, storm slab, dry loose, and cornice. And then we have avalanche problems and hazards that come through warming and rain. And then we have persistent hazards and ones that happen in old snow layers. So we use these 9 avalanche problems to speak and communicate to the community the different types of avalanches that you may encounter. And if you were to go out and take a more in-depth multi-day avalanche program, like a level 1 avalanche course, which is usually 3 days in most parts of the country, you'll learn how to understand these different avalanche problems and what your risk mitigation strategies would look like between these different problems. These sorts of avalanche problems are communicated in most regions in the world that have avalanche forecasting programs, and we've got a few examples of how Europe does it, and the examples to the right are how New Zealand decides to categorize avalanche problems. So let's talk about red flags. So red flags are really something that you all should incorporate in your front country and back country experience. It's a way of categorizing your observations in the terrain and snow that you happen to be in. And little side note, it's really remarkable to read through a bunch of avalanche incident and accident reports, and where surviving members of the party are interviewed, and how often we hear them talk about how they noticed some of these red flags but didn't change their behavior or their terrain. Oftentimes we hear, I observed recent avalanches, or I saw cracking or heard collapsing in the snowpack. So these are really useful tools for you all to understand the unstable snow component. And so anytime you have lots of new snow, that should be considered some form of a red flag. Just any sort of new loading to the snowpack just should heighten your awareness. And obviously there's an interplay between new snow and good riding conditions. So it takes a little bit of a nuanced understanding to be able to go out and ride lots of new snow and steeper terrain in the backcountry, and understand that and try to figure out, is that risk acceptable for me or not? And that's something that comes with experience over time. But a big red flag that you really need to heed is recent avalanches. So if you see or hear an avalanche, that's like you can't get better. You just can't have a better observation to unstable snow. And then next to that is kind of, are you observing kind of recent avalanches? Does it look like something ran overnight or a few hours ago, or maybe the day before? Those are indicators, once again, that, yeah, it could be very unstable, especially if you see recent avalanches in terrain that's similar to what you want to go to. So whether it be in the similar area, similar elevation, or similar aspect. Cracking or collapsing is another great red flag indicator of unstable snow. Cracking is like it sounds. I'm sure many of you have experienced it off of your skis or snowboard. You're cruising along, and all of a sudden a crack shoots out off the tip of your ski. What that's telling you is that there's unstable snow beneath you, and you're an effective enough trigger. Collapsing is where you feel kind of the whole snowpack collapse under you, and it kind of makes this whomping sound. Also an indicator of some sort of a weak layer underneath that slab that you're on. Anytime you have rapid warming, that's just a red flag. Almost anytime you have anything rapid with the snowpack, that should be a red flag. And then wind loading is another big red flag. If you get up there and there's snow's blowing around and you see plumes off the high peaks, that's just an indicator that you probably ought to take it down a notch and tread lightly. So, there's a collection of other signs out there. It's a little hard to facilitate this question in a webinar, but rain, first sun after a long storm period, you get, a few days of snow and then the sun comes out. That's another red flag that you ought to heed and pay attention to. Oftentimes that's where there's really good riding occurring. So, maybe you change the point in your day that you're out there. Maybe you're trying to be there earlier versus later. Yeah. So maybe just a moment to chat about, a collection of these avalanche danger signs. I suspect many of you will get into the backcountry or are already getting into the backcountry through a gate at a ski area. And these signs come in all shapes and sizes. Some are some are a little more skull and crossbones than others. Some are a little bit more informative. Either way, I think the takeaway with a lot of these signs is more it should be a heads up that you need a different set of goggles on your head as you go through, different set of lenses to look through versus how you might be in the ski area. Most of these signs are indicating that you're leaving an area that has professionals managing your risk for you. While they're not perfect, as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, avalanches can and do occur inside of a ski area in open terrain. It's rare, especially given the number of skier visits we see every year. It's remarkably safe. But as soon as you go outside these gates, as soon as you go past one of these signs, the risk is now on you, and how you look at terrain and how you choose terrain and how you work with your group it should be a different process. So that's I like to think about, like, okay, I need to look at everything through a different set of lenses now, because I don't have all the support of the ski area to help me manage my risk. It's all on myself and the partners that I'm with, and hopefully partners. So just a quick shift to kind of highlight what avalanche centers do. So I work at the Northwest Avalanche Center. We forecast for Washington and Northern Oregon, and we provide a public avalanche forecast for the backcountry. So what we're doing is sending out a team of forecasters. They come back, they take a look at a bunch of public observations, they talk amongst themselves, they look at a bunch of weather data and snowpack data, and put together a backcountry product that supports you and becomes kind of the foundation for you to manage your risk in the backcountry. And I could talk for 6 or 8 hours on just how to actually use the page that we're looking at here, because it is somewhat complicated. But the gist of it is that we give a forecast for a given day, for a given zone. And within that zone, we have 3 different elevation bands. But we always start at the top with the bottom line. And I should also say that this is a format that most avalanche centers in North America are using. It looks almost exactly the same. So no matter where you're tuning in from, the product that you're working with is pretty much equal. So we start with the bottom line, which is really the best way to think about that is if the forecaster caught you in the parking lot heading out into the backcountry and they had 30 seconds to tell you the most salient information that they could to help you manage your risk, it's the bottom line. From there, you step down to the avalanche danger, which is given on a 5-point rating scale: low, moderate, considerable, high, and extreme. And it's done in 3 different elevation bands for that zone. And then if you step down further, we get into avalanche problems, which I mentioned before. And there's some nuanced information in there. That paragraph narrative that you see in there is what the forecaster is trying to tell you to help support you to get out for that day and to manage that, in this case, storm slab. And then we have, in this case, there's 2 problems. There's the storm slab and then wet loose. And then further down is a forecast discussion where you can really find the nuances. And then it's supported with media. And so this is kind of, and when you go out and take a level 1 program, a level 1 avalanche course, you'll learn to work with this sort of a product, and you'll find that this avalanche forecast it really becomes the foundation for you to figure out where to go and also where not to go for your day. So this is just a little bit closer look at what the bottom line looks like. And it's good to know. So our forecasts come out at 6 p.m. for the following day, and they're good during the day for one day. An avalanche forecast center is really only forecast for 1 to sometimes 2 days. And so it requires you to look at this forecast the day before or the morning of your day when you're out. So I would encourage you all to familiarize yourself with your local avalanche center, and then ultimately take an avalanche course that will teach you really how to use this and to apply it. This is a slide of the danger scale that we're using. And as mentioned, avalanche centers are issuing that scale in 3 different elevation bands for the given zone that they're forecasting for. And those elevation bands are different between centers. These are the ones that we're using at the Northwest Avalanche Center here near Seattle. And then the danger scale is the forecasting tool that we use to communicate the chance of an avalanche happening at a particular time in a particular area. So it goes from low, moderate, considerable, high, and extreme. Worth noting that about half of the avalanche fatalities that occur in North America occur in considerable. And about 30% occur in moderate. So between level 2 and level 3, we see about 80% of our avalanche fatalities occurring in the US. So just because it's yellow doesn't mean it's good to go. And likewise, considerable, while it's the middle point in the scale, I think of it as probably the most tricky to navigate. And if you take a look at the travel advice, which is kind of the kind of tight language that we've developed around what you should do when it is this rating. If you look at that first part of the travel advice in considerable, it says dangerous avalanche conditions. And the real challenge with considerable is it's dangerous avalanche conditions and not obviously so. You don't get a lot of feedback from the snowpack when it's considerable. You don't get tons of cracking and whumping, and you don't see a lot of natural avalanche activity. And yet it's ripe for human triggering. So just heed that warning. So we communicate avalanche problems first by telling you what it is, then telling you where we expect it to be. We talk a little bit about the likelihood of you encountering that avalanche problem. And then if you were to trigger the avalanche, or if an avalanche were to be triggered, how large might that avalanche be? And this is done on the destructive potential scale, or D scale, ranging from small to large. The definition of a D2 avalanche is large enough to to injure or kill a human. So once again, the smaller end of the scale is dangerous to people. That's just another version of an avalanche problem for wet loose. So shift gears for a sec. I think we've got a few more minutes. Avalanche equipment. If you're to be in avalanche terrain in the backcountry, these 3 items are required, and I would say that they're required for all members of your party. So on the left is an avalanche transceiver or beacon. In the middle is an avalanche probe. And then on the right is an avalanche shovel. And I say the word avalanche probe and avalanche shovel because they're specifically designed to work for companion rescue in an avalanche. So the probe is specific, so it needs to be a specific purpose-built avalanche probe and shovel. And then, of course, the training to use it is as important, or probably more important, than actually having it. And that's, once again, if you really want to get serious about being in the backcountry, you take an avalanche class, and now they have avalanche rescue courses, and that gives you the hands-on experience and training to practice with these life-saving tools. And then also, once again, as a reminder, everyone in the party needs all 3 of these. And they are equally important. So if you're new to the backcountry, do not assume that you can buy an avalanche transceiver and call it good, or buy an avalanche transceiver and a shovel and get the probe next year. We see that a lot. The probe seems to be the one piece that people want to leave at home, and the chance of a successful rescue minus the probe plummets. It's as important as the shovel. So make sure you have all 3. So these are just a couple tips that the BRASS Foundation put together. Partners help. Ski with people, especially in times of instability. And then an avalanche forecaster from Utah put together a paper. A couple of forecasters put together a paper a handful of years ago for a snow science workshop called Effectively Solo. Meaning, and they took a look at the avalanche incidents where there were people that had partners, but they were the avalanche accident had poor outcomes, i.e. fatalities, because the people were effectively solo, meaning they didn't stay together. And it happens a lot more than we'd like it to. So just because you have a partner, if you need to stay with that partner during the day, during the tour, during the trip. So keeping a visual, staying connected, communicating is really important. Don't leave your partner behind, because you are their lifeline. Ropes matter, especially in ski areas. Don't duck them. They're there for a reason, especially in times of instability. Understand your ability, and I don't mean how good of a rider you are. I mean your ability to read the snow, assess the group, and manage your risk. And that and how good of a skier or rider you are not necessarily linked. So understand, are these conditions that you've been in? Are you experienced with this type of snowpack? Have you been in this terrain? Do you know if this sort of terrain produces frequent avalanches or not? Those sorts of things are good to self-assess and assess within your group. Plan your routes. We know that people that do some planning and have conversations about where to go and where not to go oftentimes make better decisions. And also groups that stop and talk and make changes with their initial plan often also perform better. So regroup and talk, and maybe you pivot. And then obviously respect what ski patrol says. This obviously applies to those in front country and side country. Blindly following tracks is a great one. I'm glad the Brass Foundation put this one in. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen 50 tracks on a slope, and the 51st skier is the one that triggers it. It does not mean that it's safe. Yeah, and then if you're having to ski a steep line and you're doing it, say, one at a time, make sure you're having a communication about where you're going to end up, where you're going to regroup, and keeping your eyes on. And then probably just a smart thing to call out tree wells. Especially in the Northwest, we oftentimes have more tree well fatalities annually than we do avalanche fatalities. So during those times of really good riding, you have lots of snow. Pay attention to tree wells, stay with your partner. Yeah, and beware. And you can find, I think, deep snow safety is something you can Google, and there's some cool resources there to understand how to avoid getting caught in a tree well, and then also how to rescue your partner from getting out of a tree well. Turns out it's a lot harder than you think. So, here in the Northwest, we have nwac.us. We also do classes like this, and we also operate as kind of a clearinghouse for local providers that give level 1 classes. Avalanche.org. That's the single place you could go for the U.S. avalanche centers. It's a great website to bookmark. Then you can get to every avalanche center in the U.S. There's 23 of them, and they're all on there. BRASSAvalanche.org. As Tom mentioned, consider making a donation. Those donations are what pay for this sort of programming. And then, be in contact with your ski patrol, especially if you're thinking about going outside of the boundary. They can oftentimes be a really good resource about what they're seeing regarding their control work and what they think the instabilities might be. So that's what I have in my short, brief overview. And yeah, thanks.
So thank you so much, Scott. And we are going to take your questions. You can put them into the chat or the Q&A box. We've got one right now, but before we go to that, I just had a couple of questions. Scott, you talked about the danger of the moderate area that's right above the low. And I know you made your point, but I think it's important enough to maybe make that again. Where do most accidents occur?
And so yeah, like around half of the avalanche fatalities that we see in the US are occurring in considerable, and somewhere around 30% are in moderate. And so when you put the two together, that's 80% of your avalanches. And we're not talking high and extreme. And I think a good way to think about it is when it's extreme, you're probably not getting to the mountains. I mean, in Utah, when they give an extreme rating, you're not getting up the canyons. So it's almost, it's practically limiting there. But then in high avalanche danger, which also occurs less frequently than considerable and moderate. So there is kind of a time piece to all of this. But in high avalanche danger, you're getting a ton of feedback. You show up at the parking lot and you see crowns and avalanches above you. You might even hear avalanches. The snow's cracking at your ski tips. It just feels scary. And then considerable, oftentimes the input that the user gets about the snowpack and how unstable it is really low. And so you're just not getting the feedback you need.
We have a question in the chat right now. Scott, beyond skiing in pairs, is there a safer or safest group size? 2, 3, 4, 5 people? Is there any science there?
Oh, I know there's a lot of science. I mean, heck, I mean, it was cool. Like actually, Cindy and I were in Norway at this International Snow Science workshop recently, and there's a ton of interdisciplinary work that's being done on trying to figure out how to, reduce avalanche impacts. And I know there's a lot of sociologists that are looking at effective group size, and they're actually pulling from other, other bodies of work around how groups make decisions. And I'm far from an expert on that. But I think, you start getting into the group size of 6 and greater, 5 or 6 or greater. And I think unless it's a real cohesive group that really knows one another and has a sense of being able to truly communicate and effectively operate, um, I think bigger groups make poor decisions. And yeah, I think maybe a pro tip for you all is that, be really self-aware on how you feel around speaking up when you're in a group that's going in the backcountry. Pay attention to, do I feel comfortable sharing my opinion or my observation, or do I feel empowered to say, "Ooh, I don't like this"? And if you don't, if you're not, feeling that, then it's probably a good idea to not be in the backcountry with that crew.
Scott, if I want to get some avalanche training and I'm in places like Washington State, where
Mm.
actually you are, or Colorado, what's a good resource to go and find an index, a curated index of where to get avalanche education?
Well, yeah, so avalanche.org is a great spot. If you're in the Northwest, the NWAC, the Avalanche, the Northwest Avalanche Center, we have a education tab on our website, and we actually have every class that's given by the 30 guide services in the Northwest. I think there's 1,000 classes or something like that on our website that are done by others. So if you're looking for like just a great list of where I can go, that's another one. And then AIARE, AIARE.org. I think it's avtraining.org is their website. They are one of the national groups.
Great. Stephen Monroe asks, is it safer to ski a line one at a time?
It's a great question. I laugh only because almost every answer in this sort of world is it depends. Um, Typically, yes, it is safer, and it's safer because it's off. I should say it's often safer because you are limiting the amount of exposure that you have in the group. And so if you've got let's say you have 2 people out skiing, you put one person down the avalanche slope. If they were to get caught in an avalanche and the other person isn't on the slope, they can be the rescuer. If you have both people on the slope and they're both caught, well, you have no rescuers. However, you always have to manage that in the conditions and be situationally aware, because if you lose your partner, split up, if they get lost, if it's a storm day and you don't have good visibility and you lose that partner, just not in an avalanche, but you can't communicate, you're also introducing other challenges to the group. So in general, it's always best to ski one at a time in avalanche terrain, but you need to be aware of what other potential challenges you might be injecting into the risk matrix.
Got Renee Wallen asks, how do you know what type of slab is under fresh snow?
The best spot to start is your avalanche forecast. Your avalanche forecast and the forecast discussion is going to give you a really good starting point as to what that stratigraphy or snowpack structure looks like. And then from there, you would go out into the mountains and take a look yourself and verify, is that hypothesis that the Avalanche Center set me up with true or not true?
And we have a question from Jim McCardle about slough. And Jim talks about how he's experienced that inbounds at Alta. What's the snow telling us in that case? I know there's a lot of variables, but what thoughts
Yeah.
can you share here?
Probably the best thing to say with sloughs and like that concept of like, skiing a steep line, managing your slough. The one cool thing that's indicating is that upper amount of snow does not, it lacks cohesion, and it lacks the ability to be form into a slab. So it instead of you worrying about a slab avalanche at that point, you're now managing this loose snow um, phenomena, which brings its own risks, especially in high consequence steep terrain. But at least it's telling you the upper part of the snowpack lacks cohesion and lacks the ability to form a slab.
Great. We don't have, well, actually, we got one more question into the queue from another one from Stephen. Oh, is there a technology to allow people in your group to talk to each other to say descend their backcountry terrain?
No, I think the best thing are those, like FRS two-way radios, like the Rocky Talkie radios and BCA mix radios. That's probably the simplest thing to adapt. They're easy to use. Yeah, that Rocky Talkie radio now they have some 5-watt radios, and they have little microphones you can clip on your pack and put the rest of it in the back. That's actually what we use at the Avalanche Center to communicate in the field.
Great. We'll take a couple more questions. We've got them in the queue. First of all, another one from Renee Wallen. If you're in an avalanche and you've got a backpack, but it doesn't inflate, what do you do?
Well, if you're the one caught in an avalanche, I mean, you try to get rid of your poles, I suppose. Try to ski right off the slab as fast as you can. Maybe try to grab something that, before you're moving too quick. At that point, and you might try to protect your head, but realistically, it's kind of left to physics at that point. The concept of like swimming doesn't really do anything the way that kind of in the physics of how avalanches work. And just hope that your partners know what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, leave the backpack on, I guess. I don't, maybe that's how the question's framed. But if you're wearing a day pack, yeah, don't try to take the pack off. It'll likely provide uh, some support and protection for your back, your spine. And if maybe in the off chance you're not buried, you've got your safety equipment attached to you
Great.
if you need to do rescue.
Michael Avalon asked, you'd mentioned earlier, Scott, about the different apps and websites you can use to show the gradations of steepness. Gaia and Onyx are examples. Can you give those again for the viewers?
Yeah, internally we use CalTopo. I think their mapping programs are probably the best regarding the GIS functionality and layering. You can get a pro version for not much money. Also Gaia, amazing. I think Gaia and Outside Magazine are connected at this point somehow. And Onyx is the other one that has some really cool layering. I would say those three are probably your top three for buying.
I'm going to go with one last question and follow up with one of my own. Elizabeth Moore asks, why are some geographic regions more highly managed, such as state-funded programs and others? I'll let you answer, and I'm going to follow up with one point there.
Yeah, I mean, regarding public avalanche forecasting programs, it really is based on, I mean, we have these different avalanche centers. They were this disparate network of forecast centers. They were all kind of born out of community need, and there's really a wide range of funding. So there are definitely areas within the U.S. that need avalanche centers that don't have them. And so, yeah, it's really a funding issue is how I see it.
I want to ask one other final question, just something that's maybe not so much for us going out of the backcountry other than awareness. But one of the things that I'm noticing, and I did a podcast for Ski Utah about this a week ago, is the number of new types of avalanche detonating devices, the GasX, compressed gas that creates a concussive force, or the Wiesen towers that drop a charge. We're seeing a lot more of those, I know, here in Utah, and I suspect you are as well out in the Pacific Northwest. Anything that skiers need to be aware of with those? It's just another mitigation tool, but do we need to be aware of anything here?
I think that's a great question, Tom. I mean, yeah, Alpental just had a few of them installed this year. I mean, I think they got them up like 3 weeks ago. Um, I think that probably the thing that I would tell the audience is to be in communication with the ski patrol, especially if you're the type of person that's hanging out or going out gates, riding in the side country. Understand where those things are and get a sense from the ski patrol how they use them. There's obviously some really tight protocols that the DOT and ski patrols are using to detonate those. They're not just haphazardly detonating them. They're going to do a pretty damn good job of communicating, like, hey, we're about to use this, stay off. It probably is this is a great question that once again underscores rope lines and closed gates. I could tell stories for hours here about near misses that we've seen with explosive charges at ski areas where they were doing active control to try to get another part of the ski area opened, and there were skiers that ducked the rope and put themselves and others in danger while the slope was being detonated. And it's same thing with these sort of devices that you're talking about, Tom. Just be really mindful, talk to the ski patrol, understand where they are, understand how they use them, and then obey the rules and signage that's put up.
Scott, we want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been great to have you
Yeah.
as part of our brass team over the years, and wish you have a great, enjoyable, and safe season. Thank you so much, Scott.
Yeah. Thanks, you all.
Scott Schell, ladies and gentlemen, great to have him back again. We're going to go now to our featured guest. I'd like to welcome Marcus Caston. Marcus, just for a little bit of background, for those of you who might not know him, he is a Salt Lake City native, so he's grown up skiing in the mountains all around me here in Park City. He has just recently returned home to Salt Lake City from a couple of years over in Switzerland. We'll talk a little bit about this. What I really want to talk about, though, with Marcus is he started as an alpine racer. He was a downhill skier at Snowbird and eventually found his way up into the big mountains. And you would know him from Warren Miller films and other places, the Return of the Turn series and more. So Marcus, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me, and thank you, Cindy and Scott. That was really cool. A lot of good information there. But yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
So Marcus, just to kick it off, tell us about 2 years living in Engelberg, Switzerland. I'm sure that had its challenges, but also lots of fun and lots of good lines.
Yeah, it was quite the learning experience in a lot of different ways. But yeah, the mountains are big and quite different. Just the way people think about and access the mountains is quite different there. Scott talked a little bit about the piste versus off-piste thing, and that's very real. It's if you're skiing a groomer, I wouldn't even say you're safe. I've seen these mountains slough off the big walls and come down and bury people on the groomer too. So I always ski with a beacon shovel probe inbounds always. And as soon as you're off the piste, yeah, you can get yourself into trouble right away. There's so much good information. I was writing some notes down. Another thing, the following tracks. And while we were over there, we had a lot of friends come and visit from the States, and it's kind of, it's amazing to see how the disconnect where you just don't quite understand it. And just because there's tracks somewhere certainly doesn't mean it's safe, especially in Europe. You can see a bunch of tracks coming down a line, and you may need a rope, or people may be ski flying off of something. So yeah, certainly don't follow tracks in Europe.
I want to piggyback on the comment you just made about wearing your transceiver and your Avi pack with a shovel and a probe inbounds. Is that something that you just kind of started over there? Or do you do it here in the States as well, depending on the circumstances?
I started doing it before we moved there. I grew up skiing here at Snowbird and Alta and never had a transceiver when I was skiing inbounds. And maybe about 10 years ago, I started wearing one all the time. It's just a good habit. I grab my skis, boots, poles, helmet, goggles, gloves, and transceiver. It's just a good thing to always have with you. If there's a lot of snow, I'll turn it on in the car. It's just, you put it on, turn it on.
It's life here in the mountains.
Yep.
Let's go back to your time at Snowbird. You're a young, aspiring alpine ski racer. Who are some of your early heroes when you were in the ski racing phase?
Oh man. Well, when I was young and still racing, another lifetime ago, Tommy Moe, Darren Rawls, Bodie, Ted a little bit later. As far as the free skiers, like we had Jeremy Novus, who was also a racer. There's just so many great free skiers up here.
Did you know Bryce Astle? I know growing up at Snowbird, you probably did know Bryce.
He was a little bit younger than me, but we got to know each other. He also skied Technica Blizzard and would come up to Mount Hood every summer. And yeah, he was a great kid and just an amazing skier. And one of the best skiers I've ever seen, and a better kid.
Yeah, it was a big loss for all of us. When you left racing, what was it that made you think about doing something other than being the fastest one down the mountain? Was there something that triggered this thought that I want to go up and do something different in these mountains?
Yeah, probably not being the fastest kid. I love ski racing. I think it's one of the coolest sports. It's, if you gave two kids a pair of skis and put them on top of the mountain, the first thing they're going to do is race down it. So I think ski racing is just so cool. But also growing up here at Snowbird, we're surrounded by big mountains and great free skiing. And I never transitioned from racing to free skiing. I just stopped racing because I wasn't the fastest one in reality, and just kept skiing.
Once you started to ski up in the big mountains and you weren't worried about what your finish time was, how did you get connected with Warren Miller?
So I was connected. I was skiing with Shred, that was Ted Liggety's goggle helmet company. And he called me one day, and they had an extra spot open in the helicopter for Alaska, and asked if I wanted to go. And it's funny that it never happens that way. You don't just get calls to go in helicopters. It happened once to me, and that never again.
How quick did you say yes?
Oh, super quick. It's funny. I was actually in Scott's area. I was up at Crystal Mountain, and it was springtime, and I was taking my last run, and I was standing on top of some cliff, and he called me and asked, and I said, well, okay, better not hit this thing. Better play it safe for one more week here.
That is just crazy. I'm curious, I know you came onto the Warren Miller film scene later in Warren's life. Did you get an opportunity to meet him?
I never did. No, I never had an opportunity to, but I've been fortunate enough to spend time around a lot of people that have, and hear all the stories, and his influence. You can sure feel it. Around the people that he got to be around and work with a lot. It's pretty cool. The impact.
How many films have you been in?
Oh, to over 10, I think. Over 10. That's I start, counting becomes hard after 10. So
yeah, I'm looking at all the cover shots on the wall behind you too. You can turn around and count those, but when help me on this. Did you discover Engelberg when you did the segment for Warren Miller there a few years back?
No, I had been there. I'd been going there for maybe 5 winters before that. I have another friend who skis with Blizzard that lives there, and I went to visit, and I ended up spending a week and then 2 weeks the next year, and maybe a month the next year, and I think it was 2 months. The last time I visited, and then we moved there.
One of our students tonight, Stephen Monroe, just popped a note in the chat. Stephen says that he skied in Engelberg a few years back. It was whiteout conditions. He went to the top. Not smart, he writes, but was able to follow the poles down. I mean, I imagine you encountered this scenario, right?
A lot of days like that. A lot of days, in the snowplow, just trying to find the groomer on the way down.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about backcountry safety. I think when you're doing filming with Warren Miller and the crew, you had people out there to help you. I mean, what was how much of an emphasis was put on snow safety when you're out in the backcountry filming with Warren Miller and other companies?
Yeah, quite a bit. And I'd say, one of the things that maybe that I'm guilty of as well, but when you watch the movies, you don't always see the amount of time that goes into it. And when you back off a line, there's plenty of times where that happens, where, you spent all this time, money, and effort into getting there, a whole team of people, going across the Atlantic and to the Alps, and you're finally standing there and you're ready to go, but conditions just aren't it. And so you back off, and there's definitely plenty of that. And I've had a lot of those moments in my life where, whether it's with Warren Miller or on a different trip, you take the time, fly somewhere. If you're ski touring, man, you could walk for hours and hours and hours, get somewhere and get totally skunked. And you just got to kind of be okay with that.
Let's just explore that a little bit further. I mean, do you have any advice to our students here tonight about how to really approach that? And I think particularly as you lined it out, when you've got an investment of money, an investment of time, whatever it is, to get there and not be able to take that run. I mean, what's the dialogue with the group, and what do you recommend people do to stay safe?
That's a big question, but I mean, I'd say first thing is I always check the avalanche forecast every day, even if I'm not going skiing. Sign on. The Utah Avalanche Forecast Center is great, for where I live. So I'm always on that, reading that. You go out at the end of the day, as far as communication goes, I always like to recap with my partners, things that we did well, maybe things that we didn't do so well. There was a lot of talk about communication and how you can communicate and, speak up. And, I find that Scott was saying that, he had mentioned that in a lot of these accidents that happen, these red flags are present. And, and people noticed them, but didn't speak up for some reason. So, another saying that I have is your ego is not your amigo. And so, I like to live by that and choose partners that live by that in the backcountry. People speaking up is super important. If you're not comfortable, or if your partners aren't comfortable, you shouldn't pressure them into doing something. They say, no, I'm not good with this. Talk about it, but generally turn around. I think, always talking and assessing, hey, maybe this route up here is a little bit safer if we do this. Maybe the sun is doing this and warming, or the wind's coming over this ridge. I mean, it can be a lot, but I think it's just really important to have a voice and communicate everything that you're seeing. I see that as being just helpful.
Marcus, Jim McCardle, one of our online students tonight, has an interesting comment. You talked earlier about an entire production backing off. If you were in a scenario like that and it was just you and a partner, I mean, might the decision making have been different given the size of the group and the complement of the group?
You know, I feel very fortunate to have had some really great mentors in the beginning of my career, where we've backed off a bunch of things. And, you know, I generally speaking, when you're filming, you're not, maybe there's a cameraman on hill and it's not maybe the safest way to like move in the mountains. That's just, in full transparency. But I have not been in a situation where I felt like it would be safe otherwise to go ski, and I've also never been in a position where I've felt like it's not safe and have been pressured to do so. I think choosing your partners and the people that you work with wisely is key. And if somebody did try to pressure me into something that I wasn't comfortable with, I mean, that's it. I think that's the last time I would go out with them.
Yeah. Stephen Monroe mentions that you need to ski at the lowest level in the group, which I think is pretty good advice. I imagine though, over time, Marcus, you've probably said no a lot to ski in a line.
Yeah, quite a bit. And another thing that I really like that Scott said is, your ability as a skier may not match your ability as a backcountry skier, or your knowledge and how to use your rescue equipment, or assess terrain or snow. So I think that's really interesting, and that was one thing that I was quite aware of when I switched from racing to backcountry skiing. Is okay, I've had 20 years of training as a ski racer, and going out, I think I could find myself in way over my head in the backcountry as far as like my knowledge for choosing terrain and snow. So I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind. Like, okay, you have 20 years of ski experience or whatever it is, but 2 years of backcountry ski experience. Maybe back off a little bit until those become a little bit more equal.
Couple of final, just quick questions, and then we're going to move on to our film off piece tonight. When you're going up in the Cottonwoods, what kind of the percentage of in area, out of area skiing that you're doing?
I'd say it's probably about 50-50. A lot of days I'll do a little bit of both. Maybe I'll go for a little walk in the morning or in the afternoon, and then hit the resort for a couple laps. But it's becoming more rare these days. I get a full day of pounding laps. So it's generally it's nice to go for a walk.
Nothing wrong with a little walk. You have skied all over the world, had some great opportunities to make some nice lines. I know this is always a tough question, but do you have that memorable line, that memorable run that just really sticks in your mind all the time?
Man, there's so many. Yeah, there's a lot. I think it was up on that slide that you introduced me with. That was in Svalbard, Norway. That was one of my first backcountry ski trips ever. And I had a lot of great mentors on that trip that I've been in touch with. But that was actually the day that I graduated college. So I didn't walk. I missed my ceremony, but we had a Bluebird day skiing down to the ocean. That's certainly a memorable day.
2 more questions. Are we going to see more from Return of the Turn?
Yeah, we have another one coming out in 12 days. 12 days. We're gonna December 16th, I believe. And then we'll have another one a couple weeks after that, and then we'll start filming again this winter. So hopefully do a few more episodes now that I'm a little closer to home.
Sweet. And we can find those on YouTube, or do you have another channel we can use?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, on YouTube, Return of the Turn. Pull them up. You'll see them. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And then last question, can Dan Egan keep up with you still?
Oh man, who asked that? Or is
Me.
that?
That's just me.
That's you. Oh yeah. Yeah. Dan's he's the best. He's such a great skier, and man, I love following that guy around. He's a gorgeous skier.
He is, but you are too, Marcus. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us and share some stories tonight and be an advocate for avalanche safety. So thank you very much. Have a great season, Marcus. Welcome home to Utah and be safe.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. This is very cool.
Well, it's fun having him, Marcus Caston. We're going to close it out tonight with a viewing of Off-Piste. I know many of you may have seen this, and just a little background on this film. This was produced by the BRASS Foundation, one of the first projects that it undertook a few years ago. And it's a recreation of the tragic accident in Solden, Austria, which occurred on January 5th, 2015, that took the lives of Bryce Astle and Ronnie Burlack. This will be the 10th anniversary coming up this January. Watch for content from BRASS. We will have an evening webinar program coming up. It probably won't be on the 5th, which is a Sunday, but probably will be one of the following days. So just keep an eye open for that. This is a 13-minute film that's been seen by over 1 million people so far. And it's a very poignant look. It's a very heart-wrenching look for those of us that knew those boys. To think about what they went through and what the families have gone through. But that's why BRASS was started. So we appreciate if you could do a couple things for us. Number one, right behind me here on the screen, there's a QR code. If you could just snap a little picture of that, and if you could click through and make a donation to BRASS, whether that's $5, $10, $25, $100, whatever, all of it helps us to put these webinars on at no cost to you, the participants. And we really hope that we're doing something to help keep people safe in the memory of Bryce and Ronnie. And the second thing is just sit back for 13 more minutes, watch the video, tell a friend, check out more at brassavalanche.org. I'll be back at the end of the film.
Ronnie! You guys see him up there? Guys, what should we do? Start digging!
Are they wearing beacons?
No beacons.
Dispatch, possible 2 avalanche victims buried.
Here.
I see something. Is this one of your friends?
Yeah, that's Bryce.
No pulse. Starting CPR. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lift on 3. 1, 2, 3. Are you sure there were only 2?
Yeah, there's two.
There's 2. Okay, we're gonna find him.
Ronnie!
Not breathing, no pulse. Starting CPR.
Nature can turn deadly in a matter of seconds.
It's hard to believe that such a tragedy could happen.
The accident has left many in the skiing world in shock.
Tragic news tonight as 2 elite skiers training for a spot on the U.S. Olympic team are killed in an avalanche.
Rescue crews from Solden were on the scene immediately with multiple helicopters.
Our thoughts and prayers are with those who are apparently lost in this specific incident.
Go for it, Brycey!
Who are you? I'm Bryce Astle. How does the gangster chains play into effect in your slalom skiing?
Pretty aerodynamic.
Happy birthday to you.
I was shattered, and I know everyone around me was too, and can't even possibly imagine what it was like for the families.
Losing Bryce and Ronnie was a huge hit to the U.S. team. They're the next generation. These 2 guys were the best in their disciplines. Bryce in slalom, Ronnie in downhill and Super G. They were the next up-and-comers. They could be the guys competing in the Olympics.
This is the famous smile because he had just won U.S. Nationals Juniors.
He always had my back, and it makes you appreciate it more now that he's not here, you know?
Bryce was such an important part of my life, and after we lost him, it was a pretty easy decision for my wife and I to name our son Bryce.
He lived for every moment. He would get done training, and he would go out and he would ski.
This is a card that we made up at the time we lost the boys, and it has Bryce, so amazing on skis, and Ronnie in his element going 70 miles an hour through the air. He was kind, and he was grounded.
Ronnie, he was always just a jokester. He wasn't afraid of the World Cup vet. He would just always speak his mind to me, and I love that about him, you know?
Watching him laughing just made me think, wow, I have the best brother ever.
He was a good teammate, he was a good friend, a good son, and we had a lot of fun together.
January 1st, 2015, I took Bryce to the airport. He was going to hook up with Ronnie Burlack and the rest of the U.S. ski team. They were going to Europe to train for Europa Cup.
We got to Solden, and it had just snowed a lot.
Obviously, there's no training because there's so much snow. So we sent everyone out to go ski around and have some fun.
Just seeing snow that's untouched and being like, this is a dream come true.
We were having an amazing time.
We could see the bottom of the valley, we could see the road, so we started skiing.
I just remember skiing across this face, and all of a sudden, I just heard cracking.
Everything underneath me started moving.
I saw Bryce, and I heard him say, oh shit. I never even saw Ronnie. We stood there, and we watched them go. Nothing made any sense. Then it just instinct took over, and there were people who had skied down right before us who saw everything and pulled out their transceivers.
Are they wearing beacons?
No beacons. No avalanche equipment.
I need shovels.
That was when I realized how stupid we were being.
Okay, does anybody have a probe? We're at the bottom of Solden 1. We need helicopter, 2 more patrollers, hasty team, then AED.
Probably took 15 minutes for helicopters to come in.
I was like pretty aware that it had been too long. The first thing that appeared was Bryce's boots sticking up out of the snow. He was upside down. His boot was 6 feet from the surface. Came across Ronnie a few minutes later.
Ronnie, we got him.
Did you get him out of the hole?
That was an image that I'll never forget.
The concept of riding up a lift, skiing on a trail, and we're in danger, that did not exist in any of our heads.
The coaches and the boys did not receive any orientation or any training regarding the dangers of skiing in Europe versus skiing in North America.
None of the young men in that group knew the difference between on and off-piste. Off-piste in the United States is defined as out of bounds, going through the gate, going under the rope. That's not what the rules are in Europe. When you are off the groomer, you are off-piste.
In Solden, the day before the avalanche that killed Bryce and Ronnie, there had been
heavy snowfall and strong winds. What that did is it put a lot of weight on top of the snowpack, which was fragile. Once these skiers got onto that slope, it couldn't support the additional weight. That weak layer fractured over a wide area, and that slab came crashing down. It produced debris that weighed almost 7 million pounds, the same as almost 10 747s.
It takes all of 20 minutes to learn and to be educated.
You want to make sure you're prepared. There are 5 points that are always really good to remember. You want to get the gear, get the training, get the forecast, get the picture, and get out of harm's way.
First, you need the gear. Going in the backcountry, you need a beacon, a probe, and a shovel. And unfortunately, that day in Solon, the boys did not have that.
I would have done anything for rescue gear, especially a shovel.
You can always increase your chances of being searchable if you're unlucky enough to be caught in an avalanche by having reco reflectors in your equipment and clothing.
Getting the gear is useless if you don't know how to use it. You've got to get the training. Take an avalanche class.
If we would have taken just one class, we would have known not to ski down that terrain in the first place.
One key thing you're going to learn in every avalanche class is that you have to check the forecast every time you ride.
None of us checked the forecast that morning. It would have taken just 2 minutes on the gondola ride, and none of this would have happened.
So when you're out on the snow, you gotta get the picture. And what does that mean? That means pay attention. Are you seeing recent avalanches? That's by far the most important clue. That's like Mother Nature screaming in your ear.
If we had known it wasn't controlled, we 100% would not have been there.
Finally, get out of harm's way. What that means is only one person is riding the slope at a time.
We were breaking one of the simplest rules. In some ways, it's a miracle that all 6 of us didn't die.
Once you get to the bottom, you need to get out of the way. That way, if somebody else in your group triggers an avalanche, you won't be caught.
These 5 simple steps everyone should know about, and everybody should be trained in. Coaches, parents, athletes, administrators of the program.
Everything that we did could have easily been prevented. I wish I could say that I couldn't have done anything to save their lives. That's just not true.
Anytime you have a major accident like this, it causes a ton of introspective thought. We realized that we really needed to look at it from the top down, bottom up. How can we make sure everybody's more educated to avert and reduce the chance of anything like this ever happening again?
That's why we at BRASS are creating avalanche education specifically for coaches and athletes. We're also creating snow safety policies to be followed by ski racing groups.
Ski racing is definitely a dangerous sport. But what we're going down is a really highly regulated area. You have all the fencing, you have the snow prep, you have all these things that are out there to keep you safe. You get out there in the backcountry, there's none of those luxuries.
For the people who assume that just because they know how to ski terrain or they know how to rip down a mountain because they ski downhill, it's a very different beast.
Don't let this happen to you and your family. Get educated, get out there, so we can keep skiing for Bryce and Ronnie, so their legacies live on.
I want to thank you all for joining us here tonight. Off-Piste is an emotional film, especially for those of us who have been involved, but it's also a reminder of the dangers and what we can do to keep ourselves and to keep others safe. If you appreciate what BRASS is doing to create awareness of avalanche safety and education, please take a quick scan of the QR code here. Drop us a small donation, be that $10, $25, $100, whatever you can spare. It'll help us to continue to spread the word on avalanche safety and to help others get educated. Remember, BRASS 101 tonight, this is just your start on your avalanche education pathway. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you again. Go to the website brassavalanche.org to learn more. Have a great night, an exciting season and be safe. Good night, everyone.